Hi guys, welcome to our second game in the Vitoria campaign published by Two Fat Larders. This is the battle for Puebla Heights. So on 21st of June 1813 the Battle of Vitoria began in earnest, with Hill's column moving over the Zadora River to assail the French left flank, which was anchored on the Puebla Heights. This scenario reflects that flanking attack by Hill. We start both sides with two brigades on the tail. We're meant to have three, but one of the brigades is a Spanish brigade, and I don't have any Spanish troops, so I've removed the Spanish from the order of battle and also taken off an equivalent French second line division as well. So we're still pretty much balanced here. So the French start the game with a infantry brigade in the village of Subiana. I think that's how you pronounce it correctly. And this is Schwitter's brigade of the 55th and 58th line. These are all standard level troops. And supported on his left, we have Maransin with his brigade, which has deployed heavily in skirmish on the Puebla Heights. Here we go here. And there are actually 5 French battalions on the hill here. You've got the 17th line, you've got 2 battalions deployed in skirmish formation, and a 3rd battalion formed up in support. And then we have the 45th line here with both battalions in column ready to provide support here, and the brigade skirmish screen for the whole brigade also deployed in proximity of the brigadier there. Now facing off against those we have O'Callaghan's 28th Foot and the 34th and 39th Foot, which have deployed in skirmish formation for the Allies. And over here, facing the village, we have Cadogan with the 50th Foot, the 71st Light Highlanders and the 92nd Highlanders. All of these units are veteran troops, and they are they are large units, so I'll put some more bases out for those before we get started on the game. Alright, both sides get quite substantial reserves. It might not come out that clearly in the camera shot, but this is all rough terrain here. So where you see the scattered trees, the black bushes on those bases, the rocks, is the heights of Puebla, and any battalion firing on that fires as an inferior volley, and all battalions move out to half speed. Skirmishers are unaffected, and skirmishers can conduct hand-to-hand combat against other skirmishers while they're in this broken terrain. Otherwise, out on the plain, all fight as normal. Alright, let's start the game. There will be a couple of rounds of fire as the British do their approach marches from this French 6-pounder battery here. So we'll do those and then we'll crack on with the start of the game. Okay, so we finished the preliminary bombardment and we're starting the game proper. So the French artillery battery here opened fire and has been reasonably effective. It opened fire at long range against the Highlanders, who were advancing across the table towards the built-up area, and we've inflicted no less than 5 casualties against them. The British artillery have also deployed and done some counter-battery fire, and indeed caused a couple of casualties now on this French artillery battery. So artillery is firing away at one another. Otherwise, for movement, the French have brought on the first of their reserves. They had a successful reserve roll, and they brought on a line brigade on their right flank to try and outflank the British position. The French do have initiative on turn 3. The British have responded to that, and their battalion that was in support has formed up into column, using its veteran status for a free formation change. So it moved itself into column and is now moving across to the flank to secure that flank against this possible, or at least fend off this possible outflanking attack here by this newly arrived French brigade. Otherwise, the French remain ensconced in the village, and they've moved their skirmish screen forward to threaten the British artillery, and the British skirmishers have moved out to face them. Over across on the Puebla Heights, the French took the opportunity of some hesitant rolls by the British to push forward with their 2 line battalions in reserve and their light battalion and their skirmish screens. So they're now closing with the British, and there'll be some exchanges of fire in this turn as we start contesting the heights. Alright, let's move on to firing in turn 3. Okay, so we'll start with these French skirmisher screen here. It's got 4 bases So it will open fire with 3 dice, but only 2 because it's firing against Sherman skirmishers. So firing on the first screen, we cause 1 casualty. Right, we'll then fire the second screen against the skirmishers on the right. And 2 casualties. Good firing by the French on this flank. While we're over here, we'll do the return fire by the British. All of their skirmish screens are 3-figure strong, and they've all got a unit of rifles in there. So that gives them an extra dice, so they should have the advantage in this combat. Right, so first shot, fire the first screen, it does nothing. The second screen causes 2 casualties on the French over here. Yeah, we'll mark the casualty counters up in a second, and then their final shot against the screen down here, 1 more casualty. Alright, we'll mark the casualties up on the skirmishers, and then move on with the rest of the firing. Okay, hopefully the sound's improved now. I forgot to put the microphone in, so firing now with the French artillery battery, it will again have a shot against the Highlanders. This will still be at long range. They don't have any benefit of artillery assault as they were rolling for reserves this time. So let's see how they do. They roll a 5, that won't be anything at long range. Half a casualty. They might cause 1 casualty against the Highlanders over there. Let's see what they do. They do indeed. 1 casualty against the Highlanders. Alright, we'll mark that up in a second. And then the British will do counter battery fire against this French artillery battery. Again, firing at long range. They roll a 9. That -2 goes down to a 7 at long range. Is half a casualty against this French artillery battery. Let's see what we do. We roll a 6. So they go up to 3. Alright, we'll mark those casualties up. Mark the casualty up against the Highlanders. And that's it for firing and the end of turn 3. On we go with turn 4. Okay, so both sides have rolled 3 ADCs, and I've remembered for the British that I do get an extra ADC if I roll a double 6. So that's good news. I think it's only 1 for a double. So the British have got 3 ADCs, so they'll deploy 2 to bring on one of their reserve brigades. Bing's brigade, I think. The French will also deploy 2 of their ADCs to bring on their reserve, which they won for being victorious in the last game, so they get another small brigade of 2 battalions to deploy. Alright, let's roll for activation. So the British have got 2 dice to bring on the reserves are on table, so it's 1 dice to release Bing, and they don't need the reroll. And then they'll put the reroll on their attacking brigade, which they don't need either, so that's active. And then the brigade on the Puebla Heights is active, so all allied brigades are active, and they have a reinforcing brigade coming on. For the French, their reserve brigade is active and comes on, and they will put their reroll on this artillery battery to allow it to have a widest field of fire. They go active. My left-hand brigade is active, and then the brigade on the far right is hesitant. So we have 1 hesitant French brigade. We'll turn the brigadier around so I remember. Alright, and so that'll be a -1 on the initiative check for the French. Let's see how we do. So the French roll a 6, -1 is a 5. British have got a 5. The French had initiative last turn, and on a draw, they retain initiative. Alright, let's move on with turn 4, and the French get to deploy their final reserve. So at the end of turn 4's movement, the French brigade here had to remain stationary as it was hesitant, and the British have now completed their redeployment to have a unit to face off against this line. The British do have to bring their reserve brigade on, which I haven't done yet. That will be going into this gap in the centre. The French otherwise have held position in the village. They've brought their reserves onto the centre here, with the option of going up onto the heights to support that, or providing a flanking attack again against the British in the centre. And on the heights themselves, the French have been aggressive and have pushed their skirmish screen forward and are now holding most of the heights. Right, I'll quickly deploy the British brigade on, and then we'll do firing for turn 4. Okay, so we've done the skirmisher fire in the Puebla Heights here, and the Allies are winning the skirmisher exchange. The 95th Rifles are giving them 3 extra dice each turn, and both have their screens fully engaged. So the French have now lost 1 stand each from their skirmish screens, but are still fighting away. In the centre, the Allies have deployed their skirmish screen from their newly arrived brigade, and so have the French over on the far right. They've been firing. and there's been a small exchange of casualties. All right, now let's open fire with the artillery. French artillery first. This time it's going to go against the battalion directly facing it. That's the closest threat. Wow, 666. That's a pretty good result. That will be at long range, but at 666 at long range is 3 casualties and a discipline test against that newly arrived battalion. Let's see what their discipline test is. They rolled a 10, so they are fine, and there will be a destiny test because we rolled a 666. All right, let's see how the battalion does. The artillery does for its destiny test. It rolls a 6, which is a recover a casualty or melees with a land. So we'll take 1 casualty off the French artillery battery, and we'll mark 3 casualties up on that newly arrived British battalion. Okay, the British artillery is going to continue with its long-range counter-battery fire, so this will be at -2. The roll of 7, that goes down to a 5. At best, that'll be half a casualty, which I will just check, but didn't cause any result. So that's it. This is where we are at turn 4 then. So we got the French right hook on the table, but the British have formed a defensive line, but it has stymied their assault on the village somewhat. British reserves, first of them, have just arrived in the centre, but they're faced off by quite a substantial French force down here. And in the battle on the heights, although the French have seized most of the ground, the British are starting to win the skirmisher exchange. All right, let's move on with turn 5. Okay, so for initiative, the British have not done well. They only rolled 1 ADC, and with that they were unable to bring their reserves on. Their 2 right-hand brigades have both gone hesitant, so will do nothing this turn. Clearly the number of casualties caused on their newly arrived reserves has put them off. For the French, we've just rolled, we rolled 4 ADCs. All of them came up and we got a 666, so we've rewarded ourselves, or we get an extra 5th ADC. Alright, so we're definitely going to do an infantry assault and a reroll on this right-hand brigade to try and put some pressure on the British on this right flank. And then the other 2, we will allocate again 1 to the defending village, and 1 to our 1 on the heights. So let's roll for the activation of these brigades. So the one on the heights is active. These reserves in the centre are active. The brigade with the artillery, with its reroll, is hesitant. It's a bit of a shame. It can only fire straight ahead, but it does actually have targets now. And then our brigade on the right with a reroll, which it needs, gets infantry assault off. So we can now attack with more than 1 battalion. Alright, now let's roll for initiative. British have 2 hesitant brigades, French have 1. So the French get a +1 roll on the initiative, and again they win initiative this turn. Alright, French gets a charge and move first. Okay, movement on turn 5 is complete, and these French infantry battalions, these ones you probably recognise are plastic, peri-plastics. These ones are moving up to threaten the British on the right here, so there'll be some choices of targets for these British battalions in line. Do they do some volley fire against the building to try and soften that up before an assault, or do they try and fend off this attack on the right? Highlanders have taken quite a lot of casualties. The gun has swiveled, so we can put some artillery fire into the building again to try and support, soften it up before an attack. All the British skirmishers are trying to knock out this French skirmish screen. These battalions are on hold. The Allies were hesitant over here. The French have continued to push forward onto Puebla Heights, looking to secure their occupancy of it and secure their battle victory conditions. Alright, that's it for movement. We'll start with French firing, and we'll kick off, as always, with the skirmishes. Okay, so we've completed the skirmisher fire on the right. The Allies continue to slightly win the exchange of fire over there, but it looks like it's going to be a long haul to knock out those French skirmisher screens. And remember, they can break more battalions down. They can only break up to half their battalions down, of which they have already done 2. So it's debatable actually whether they can break any more down. Otherwise, the skirmish screens will have to go against the French line battalions on the hill. Alright, we'll now open up with some volley fire. Firstly, we'll fire the Highlanders into the building. This will be a veteran volley, so this will be a superior volley, but you halve casualties if you're firing at a strong point, and it's -1 because of the number of casualties they've taken. So they roll a 6. For a superior volley is 2 casualties, down to -1 is a 5, that's only 1 casualty, halved, you round down to 0. Okay, so Then we'll fire the, we should be doing the French artillery first. We've just done the skirmishes and the French did have initiative. So we'll fire the French artillery. It won't go against the British guns, so there won't be any counter battery fire. It'll fire again against that blue flagged British unit at long range. See what it does. It's only taken 2 casualties, so this is a full effect, but we roll a 3. That's not great, that's a fatigue casualty. So the French artillery battery is up to 3 casualties. 1 more and it won't be able to do artillery assault. Alright, okay, let's resume the firing. Okay, with the British artillery battery, it's going to fire against the building. This, I think, will be at effective range. We'll just check. Yeah, it's about 15 inches, not far off short range. Alright, so this British horse artillery battery opening fire against the building. Again, this will be at half effect and -1 because the target's in cover. So a 7 and 8 goes down to a 7, which is 1 casualty. Halve it is nothing. Okay, so then we've got the 71st Scottish Highlander Light Infantry. So they, again, can have a superior volley and they will get an extra dice, combat dice, for being a large battalion, I believe. Large battalion, yeah, gets 1 extra combat dice. They've not taken many casualties. Just having a look now. Yeah, I think that's 2 casualties. Well, table creaked as I leant on it. Alright, so this will be a normal shot. We are going to go against the building because that is our objective, are we? No, actually I think we're going to go against this battalion here. We're going to try and break this French brigade. Alright, firing against this French battalion here. That's a 7. Nothing from the casualty dice. 7 does 3 casualties. Gets this French battalion. And then we're going to fire our other British battalion through the skirmish screen. That's an 8. That also caused 3 casualties. The first one had to be taken against the skirmish screen, but it does also cause a discipline test. So they roll an 8, so they are fine. So started to take casualties on these French battalions, but that's it for turn 5. Let's move on with turn 6. Okay, so turn 6, and the French again have initiative. All Allied brigades are active. One of the French brigades is hesitant, so we may see some movement forward as they try and push the French off the Puebla heights, and indeed movement forward by this central British brigade that's arrived. And we can see the Portuguese reserve brigade has arrived to potentially reinforce the attack in the centre. It will need to have a redeploy order to move through the solid British front line at the moment, but we are actually waiting for the French to launch their attack on the right. That'll be the first action of turn 6. Alright, let's move charges. French have initiative. I think we've got some attacks going in. Okay, so we've done movement on this half of the map, so the skirmish screens are closing and the British are moving forward slightly. This British brigade has now moved more firmly onto the table. It's pushing its skirmish screen up to start threatening the French guns here. Otherwise the skirmish battle in front of the British guns is carrying on, and the British are waiting to receive this French charge. So let's do a charge resolution. We'll start with the right-hand attack. These will be some defensive volleys against these attacking by those British battalions against these attacking French battalions. Okay, so opening fire here. The British are both large battalions. Indeed, all 3 are in this brigade. So they get 2 extra combat dice. Let's see what this superior volley does. 6 is 2 casualties plus 2 extra casualties, so that's 4 casualties on the attacking French battalions. 2 go on each. Okay, so doing this right-hand charge, there's a +4 modifier for the British. The French do get the benefit of a reroll because of the number of casualties caused. Not great, so the French get a 4, the Allies get an 8. The French will definitely use their reroll. Even worse, a 3 against an 8. An 8 with a modifier becomes a 12. The British have won by 6. The attacker retreats, and they take an extra 1d3 casualties. So that's 3 more casualties. We'll distribute those and then retreat those attacking battalions. Okay, so we'll now do the defensive volley by the 71st Light. Again, 2 bonus dice. Not so, I don't know why I was wrong. Oh yes, that's 1 extra casualty dice and a 4 on the superior volley. That's only going to be 1 casualty at most. Superior volley is 1, so that's 2 casualties on the French. 1 on the attacking unit and 1 on its support. Just marker for that. Tricky to do a marker one-handed. There we go. Alright, and now let's roll the charge results. So on the charge results, the allies get 1 for being veterans. They cause 2 casualties in the charge, which makes it a 2, and the unit casualties are a 3. That'll be +3 to the allied charge result. Let's see what we do. The French do get a reroll. We will do a reroll, but again, this is looking good for the allies. Oh no, not so good, but still a pretty impressive result. So the allies get 13, the French get 9, so they've lost by 4. So on -4, they retire with 1 casualty. Alright, we'll move the French back. Again, as always, just how hard it is to charge veteran British infantry, even ones who've taken a few casualties. Whole French brigade going in here and all thrown back, despite having the re-rolls for their supporting units. They'll try and shake themselves out and reform and continue to be a threat, at least on this right flank of the French position. We'll start with firing over here. It'll be skirmisher firing, and we'll crack them with the French and come back with the artillery fire in it. Okay, so the British continue to do well over here in amongst the trees. The British again exchanging skirmish fire with all these French skirmishers. French lost 2 bases this turn, the British only 1. So British superiority starting to mount up here, and they'll soon start pushing forward, I think. In the centre, the rest of the skirmish fire was pretty ineffective. However, the Highlanders here are in big trouble now. They've now taken 9 casualties in that exposed position, taking a lot of artillery fire earlier on and now repeated fire from the garrison. Otherwise, a couple of casualties on the right-hand battalion caused by that French skirmisher screen. But that's it on this side. So let's do the French artillery fire. This is artillery assault by this gun battery, firing at the blue flagged British unit in the centre at long range. Well, that's a fatigue casualty, and I think if you're an artillery assault, that's possibly 2 fatigue casualties. And then 1 combat dice casualty. So let's reach over, whoa, and mark that up. Takes them up to 4 casualties. But this gun now is in not great shape. It's now taken 5 casualties and might well have to limber up and withdraw to save itself being a casualty from those allied skirmishes, unless we can drive them off. Alright, now we'll do some volleys from the allies. Let's start with our artillery fire. So British artillery fire, -1 and half effect against the building. 4. That'll be -1. That takes it down to a 3. So that'll be a fatigue casualty on the British light artillery. We'll put a 1 over there to remember to mark that casualty up. Then we will fire into the building with the Highlanders. So this will be at -2. A superior volley. No, that will do nothing. Lose fire discipline. And then we will fire the other large unit. Oh, there should have been a combat dice, which does cause a casualty from the Highlanders. Takes the garrison up to 2 casualties. And then we'll fire the 71st light into the building. Again, half effect and -1. A 5 will go down, will only cause 1 casualty, I think, from a superior volley. Yeah, 1 casualty, which goes down to nothing, but again, the combat dice for being a large battalion causes a extra casualty on the garrison. So they're up to 3. So not great firing by the British infantry battalions. In fact, I can't do that one. That will be firing twice. The 71st Light can't fire into the garrison as they fire to drive off this attacking French battalion here. So we'll just reinstate that casualty. That's it for turn 6. Let's move on with turn 7. Okay, so not great rolls for the French. 3 hesitant brigades. Clearly the failed assault on this right flank has disheartened the French army at this point in the battle. They have, however, managed to get an activation on this right-hand brigade. So that's the only active brigade in the French army, so the retreating battalion is now simply unformed. For the Allies, all brigades, apart from the brigade in the centre, have gone active. So this will be a +2 for the British on the initiative roll. I don't believe it. Again, I think I'll take that as a 1. That is initiative for the French, despite having 3 hesitant brigades. Right, let's see if they do any movement and charges. So on turn 7 on the Puebla Heights, the French continue to develop their defensive formation, another battalion going into line, anticipating perhaps the collapse of their skirmish screen. In the centre, the British forces are unable to move forward because they're hesitant, and the French remain on the defensive in the centre. The village is still looking strongly defended. Portuguese are starting to move forward, and we're starting to move the Highlanders out of the way to create a gap for the Portuguese brigade to protect the village and to potentially protect them from further casualties. And the Portuguese skirmishers have moved up into the attack position for the brigade, and they're providing some shielding for the Highlanders as they do that, but they are masking their artillery battery. That won't fire this turn. Otherwise, the French have reformed down here, and the Allies on the right, on the French right, the Allied left, have started to move forward to try and continue the pressure on this brigade, see if they can break them with some good old British volleys. All right, turn 7. And that's it for movement. We'll move on with fire. We really are seeing relentless pressure from the British skirmishers. So you've got one small screen there left, one casualty on it, but only 2 bases. 4 bases on the divisional screen, but the screen on the right has now evaporated under British fire. 3 more casualties were called on the British, but no bases lost. So 3 French bases lost, and there will be a falter test on that brigade as a result of a light battalion effectively being wiped out this turn. Alright, so the first notable victory on the right flank for the British. Okay, so we'll remember to do that falter test, and let's put some dice by the commander so I can remember. Put 2 6s by him. Okay, so we have to do the falter test on that brigade. Otherwise, we'll now carry on with the rest of the firing. Okay, so the French guns again are going to fire at the attacking blue flagged infantry battalion. 4, that's another casualty. 1 away. They really are going to have to limber off and move off next turn. It's vital they withdraw rather than be destroyed. Okay, so that's the French firing from there done, and that's it. All French skirmishers are fired. Right, now some return fire from the British. The British artillery battery is masked. We will fire the 71st Scottish into the garrison. It's at 7. So a superior volley does 3 casualties. That gets reduced to 2. That's halved to 1 more casualty to the garrison of the village. Alright, and then we will volley this French skirmisher screen in front of this battalion here. This is an inferior volley because we moved. A 7 inferior volley is 1 casualty. Down by 2 is a loss of fire discipline if they're recruits, which they're not. So fire both those batteries. That's it. That's it for turn 7. Let's see what happens as we move into turn 8. Okay, so the British have done well on activation. All the British brigades are active, and the Portuguese have managed to get infantry assault off, so we might see them go into the village. On the right, this French brigade has gone hesitant. The one in the centre is active, which is good, so they can withdraw that artillery in their movement phase, hoping they get initiative. And on the right, we have our falter test to do. We did allocate 2 ADCs for the French to do this, so we have a reroll. Let's see what we get. A 6. They obey orders. That's a good result for the French. They will carry on as normal and are active. So this will be an initiative test at -2 for the French, because of their 2 hesitant brigades. The Allies finally get initiative in turn 8. Okay, so another falter test for the French over here. Another French battalion's been wiped out by the Allied skirmisher fire. So that's the 2nd Light Battalion destroyed, and the British, I think, will soon start to dominate this part of the battlefield. In the centre, the British battalion's moving forward. The French foot artillery has limbered up and moved off table. It wasn't destroyed by the Allied skirmishers. The French defending the village fired against the charging Portuguese infantry, but didn't drive them off. And over here we'll have an exchange of musketry as both sides have formed lines and will start exchanging fire. Alright, let's start with firing on the right flank. Allies to fire first. So we'll have an exchange of inferior volleys here. The Allies have an advantage because they have casualty dice, because they're a large battalion. They roll an 8 as an inferior volley is 2 casualties, and they get an extra casualty from the casualty dice. takes these casualties on the French battalion up to 6. We'll do their firing back as we're here. This will be at -1 on an inferior volley. A 7 goes to a 6 on an inferior volley. Is 1 casualty on the Allies. Okay, these 2 battalions are still out of range. The Allied artillery can now open fire. Not much to target. It'll target this battalion here at long range. 2 shots, does 3. That's a fatigue casualty. Don't target things at long range unless you have to. Alright, that's it. We'll now, final event of the turn, will be hand-to-hand combat for the village for the first time as the Portuguese charge in. Okay, so this will be a straight roll-off, 4 dice versus 4. Both start with 5. The Allies lose 1 for attacking a built-up area. The French lose 1 from the number of casualties they've taken from artillery and skirmish fire. Let's see how we do. Both sides cause 2 casualties and they can throw in supporting battalions. Well, the Portuguese are definitely going to do that. They're going to throw support in, and the French will do likewise. Okay, we'll be breaking for tea, but let's just do this roll-off. The Allies will get 1 re-roll as I don't have enough red dice for this combat with both battalions going in. Okay, let's see how we do. Alright, so the French get 3 casualties, the Allies get 1 further re-roll, which doesn't achieve anything. They only cause, in fact, the French get 4 casualties, and the Allies have only caused 2. So the French hold the village, and the Portuguese are thrown back. Okay, so this is a 16-turn game, and we're now halfway through, starting turn 9. So let's roll for ADCs. French get potentially 4. That's not good. They only get 1 ADC, which they'll have to roll and allocate for their falter test, and they might they won't get a re-roll on that. So that's bad timing for the French to get a poor ADC roll, and then for the Allies, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 brigades on the table, and they get 3 ADCs. All right, we'll have a think about how we are going to allocate those for orders, and then we'll roll for activation. Okay, so with some good die rolls, all our brigades are active for the French, as are all the Allied brigades. So now simply we have to do our falter test for the loss of our light battalion on the Puebla heights. Let's hope. For the French, we get a good roll. We roll a 6. That's 2 6s on 2 falter tests in a turn. That brigade hangs on, and we move on to turn 9. Okay, so on the Puebla heights, the French have started withdrawing their remaining skirmisher screen to protect this infantry battalion on the left. The one on the right is now just exposed to British skirmisher fire. The British skirmishers have actually pulled back a bit to stay out of volley range of the French infantry, and they'll see what damage they can do. Meanwhile, the French have moved these 2 battalions forward to continue to contest Puebla and challenge that British battalion that's moving up in their direction. In the centre, the French have formed their infantry battalions into line to fill the gap taken by the retiring artillery battery, and the British continue to advance towards them. Around the village, the Portuguese are reforming for another assault at the village, and the skirmish screens remain in place for the Allies. The French have actually been a little bit cunning, and they've done retire. They've stepped back by the battalion that was occupying the village, and they've advanced a new battalion into the village as they weren't under pressure this turn, and they've continued to deploy into line, and they've moved another battalion out to the flank here to put some pressure on the Allies. Alright, that's it for movement. Let's move on to firing for this turn. Some good firing by the French up on the Puebla, and we've seen an exchange of 1 skirmisher base lost each, but the French are heavily outnumbered by these British skirmishers, so that will continue to tell. In the centre, not much going on. A couple of shots from the French skirmisher screen. Sorry, the Allied skirmisher screen will do a French volley back at these skirmishers. This will be an inferior volley. Well, we do roll a 10. That's not too bad. It'll be -2 for shooting at skirmishers, and an inferior volley because we moved. So that'll be an 8 as an inferior volley. There's 2 casualties on the Allied skirmisher screen. Alright, I'll mark that. Okay, and then we'll fire the 2 more inferior volleys against these 2 opposing British battalions. Both French battalions moved. First one gets a 10, and the second one rolls a 4. The 4 won't be anything, but the 10 as an inferior volley is 3 casualties and a discipline test against that British battalion on the far right. So they've already taken 7, so that takes them up to 10 casualties. That's not great. And a discipline test at -2. Wow, they roll a 3, so they are on at least a retreat result. All right, I'll go and check that and mark up the casualties. Okay, so that was a bit devastating, that volley by the French conscripts. They caused 3 casualties in their volley, and then they caused the British to retreat, and they took a further 3 casualties. So they're now on 13 casualties. Luckily, being a large battalion, they've still got 2 left, but I don't think we're going to be seeing that one in action anymore, and it might be time for the French to think about pressing on again on the right flank, as the yellow flag unit that was disordered by that retreat has also taken very heavy casualties. So the attrition of fighting against the built-up area earlier in the game, and now having to face this whole French brigade starting to wear this British battalion out. I think the hope for the Allies is in the centre, where we still have 2 fresh British battalions here, and on the right, where they're succeeding in Puebla. All right, let's move on with turn 10. Okay, so at the beginning of turn 10, both sides, although the British didn't get many ADCs, they did manage to activate all of their brigades, as did the French. So it's a straight roll-off. And once again, the French, who are doing really well in this game, keep initiative. Let's see whether they've got any charges to go in, and then French movement this time. Clearly our skirmishers' accuracy has deserted us, as no casualties inflicted by either the French or the Allied skirmishers on Puebla. And they're obviously regrouping, ready for the next effort. This is playing into the French hands, really. They've got to hang on for 16 turns. We're currently in the middle of turn 10, so if they can hold Puebla for another 6 turns, that'll go a long way to meeting their victory conditions. These 2 battalions here are also reinforcing the French control of the heights. Down in the centre here, we are going to start with a French volley, which will go against the Highlanders, but it'll go through this skirmish screen first. Alright, this will be a regular volley. We roll an 8 for a standard volley. That's 3 casualties. That'll be 1 against the skirmish screen, which takes it up to 3, so they will lose a base. Let me put the camera down. 1 against the skirmish screen, which reduces it down to 2 bases, and then 2 go onto the Highlanders behind. And we'll do the next volley again against the approaching Allied infantry. This is 7 on a standard volley. That is 2 more casualties. It takes this British battalion up to 6 casualties. Alright, then we move across here. Again, 2 important volleys for the French. If they can do as well as last time, they may go a long way to breaking this flank. Alright, first standard volley, a 7. That is 2 casualties against the approaching 71st Light Infantry. And then the other battery, another 2 casualties. So no discipline test, unfortunately, but 4 more casualties on the 71st Light, which takes them up to 6 casualties, which at least hinder their fire. And then we will have a go with this battalion here. It will be a column. It will be a half effect. No, we won't. We won't risk it. We don't want to get pinned with losing fire discipline. All right, that's the French firing done. Now let's do British volleys. So none all the way through to here. So we have a inferior volley as we move forward with this blue flagged battalion. That's an 8. That is 2 casualties against the French down here. Let's put a dice on them to mark that up. We got some skirmish fire here we missed. So we've got 1 dice from the French skirmishers at the Portuguese, which doesn't do anything, and 2 dice from the Portuguese back at the French, which doesn't do anything. That's nothing. And then we've got the Allied horse artillery battery. It's going to fire across at this French line battalion on the Puebla heights. They'll get -1 for cover. They roll a 10. That's pretty good. At long range, that goes down to a 9. That's 1 casualty and a discipline test on this French battalion. Let's just do the discipline test. 7. There we go, 7. They're fine. They hang on in there, but there's a casualty to mark up. All right, moving across, we've then got the 71st Light. This will be a volley at -1, a superior volley. Wow. That's an 11. That's pretty good. Good British firepower. That's 5 casualties in a discipline test. Takes the casualties on this battalion up to 6. So it'll be a discipline test at -1. They roll a 4, that goes down to a 3. That is a retreat result, and they have to fall back behind their support. Okay, and the final action for the turn will be the Portuguese charging into the French occupation of the village. Portuguese lose a dice because it's a built-up area. They cause 1 casualty. The French cause 2. Again, they hold the village. I think with a built-up area, win by 1. No, we do get to fight on. All right, the Portuguese are going to elect to fight on and throw in their supporting battalion, as will the French. Okay, so critical now, the second round of combat. The 2nd French battalion and the 2nd Portuguese battalion are thrown into the Battle of the Village. The Portuguese will get a re-roll on one of their misses. There we go. All right, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 casualties caused by the Portuguese, and then we've got 2 caused by the French. The Portuguese win the second round of combat and have captured the village. Okay, turn 11, French have initiative holding on all right on the Puebla heights, but there's been big action in the centre. The Portuguese have captured the village and there's not much French force to take it away from them. This brigade will have to try and stand firm, reform the 2 units that have been thrown out the village. They've both taken quite heavy casualties from the 2 infantry assaults, and these 2 battalions need to hold off the British here if there's any chance of a counterattack. On the right, that's where the French counterattack will have to come from. They've got to reform one of their battalions, but they're still in a pretty good position against the British over here. In the centre, perhaps we need to apply some pressure with these battalions, try and do a flanking attack on the British over here. All right, let's move. It's French have initiative in turn 11. Okay, so over on the right, the Allies are still relying on their skirmishers to knock these French battalions back. Down here, the Essex has moved forward against this French battalion who've deployed into line, and the 2nd battalion has now swung to its right to potentially be able to do a flank attack against the advancing Highlanders. They're standing off. They will actually move this skirmish screen off to their flank to do something against that French battalion there, and allowing the main battalion to volley against the French, try and break them with our Highland volleys. Yeah, I think we'll actually wheel back a little bit. We don't want to get caught in the flank, and the British did move 2nd, so we're protecting our flank even if that takes us out of musketry range. And we'll leave our skirmishers on the hill up there. All right. Otherwise, the Portuguese are moving forward to consolidate their position in the village. And actually, on the left, the French formed a fantastic arc of fire against those British units in an attempt to break them. And as a result, the British left flank brigade has started to pull back a bit, throw its own skirmishers forward to try and protect his position and hang on and not be broken. Right, that's movement done. Let's do firing in turn 11. Okay, 10, 11 firing has rippled along the lines. Mainly light casualties, nothing particularly catastrophic until we get across to the centre here, when the British opened fire and caused 6 casualties on this French line battalion and rolled a double 6 and inflicted a destiny test as well, which means we'll have to take a faltering test on this brigade as we cross the rest of the lines. Otherwise, the British had just moved themselves out of range from all that French musketry, so no outcome there. All right, let's move on to turn 12 and ADCs. Okay, so irrespective of this test, the British have got initiative for the next turn, but we do have a falter test for this French brigade. We have allocated 2 ADCs, so the original roll is a 5. That's pretty good on a line battalion. That is a bay order, so no reroll needed. The French remain in the fight. All right, but the British have initiative in turn 12. Right, let's do a complete recap on the line at the start of turn 12. So French and British skirmishers still engaged on the extreme far French left flank. The British line battalion has now reached musketry range on the Puebla heights with the French. More French and British facing off British skirmishers, and a British line battalion also again in musketry range with its French colleagues. The French down here have deployed into line and will advance into musketry range next turn with both battalions to put some pressure on the Scots, who currently have no target. Here again, musketry duel going on, which the British won last turn. In the centre, the Portuguese are now starting to advance around the edge of the village to put pressure into this position here and this weakened French brigade that was been holding the centre all the game. And on the right, the French continue to manoeuvre to try and use their musketry to overwhelm this British brigade on the right-hand side. All right, that's movement complete. Let's move on with firing. Okay, let's start here then. So we have an inferior volley from the British who move forward to get the French into range. We roll a 6. Inferior volley is 1 casualty against the French. I'll get a casualty marker in a second. Whoa, just caught a tree on my microphone table. Right, we fired all the skirmishes. Okay, again, a superior volley this time for the British battalion facing off against the French here in the centre. That's a 6, that's 2 casualties against this French battalion. Right, the Scots have nothing in range. Okay, so the blue flagged British battalion here will fire against its French counterparts. They did so well last turn, they get a 7. That's 3 casualties. This battalion is really at the point of collapse. Right, now chance for the French to volley back. Standard volley here against the... And in fact, everything on here is inferior volleys because it's rough terrain. So that's an inferior volley. And apologies if I did 1 or 2 too many casualties to the French there. 2 casualties against the British and a discipline test. I think that's the first casualties against that battalion. And they pass their discipline test with flying colours. We'll mark those casualties up in a second. This battalion here will also do a volley if it's in range. I will assume it is, and I don't think it is. I will just go and measure. No, that battalion is out of range of all targets, so we'll fire this one. This will be a standard volley against that British battalion facing it. Again, an inferior volley. I'll get it right eventually. 3 casualties and a discipline test against the British here. Okay, so they're on 3. That will take them up to 6. That'll be a test at -1. Let's do the test. Wow, they retreat, and they will probably retreat off board, and they take an extra 1 casualty. All right, I will just go and move that. That was indeed, it was 17 inches to the table edge, so that British battalion has retreated off table. That brigade is nearly at 50% casualties, but anyway, it's still fine. All right, we'll do a standard French volley here, but at -2. Wow, that's a pretty good roll at -2. That's 10 casualties. Standard volley, sorry, that's a 10. It goes down to an 8. That's 3 casualties against the British. Well, that takes them up to 9. There's a lot of very damaged units on this table. All right, and then down here, we got a volley here against the British skirmishers. We roll a 9, that'll go down to a 7. I think that'll just be 1 casualty on a standard volley. No, 2 casualties on the skirmishers. They'd already taken 2. So they lose a base. Ooh, in fact, I think they might have lost another one. I seem to have 2 casualty markers on them. All right, and then these 2 will do a volley against the 71st Light. Let's just check the range again, make sure they're in musketry range. I think they are. They both will be inferior volleys as they moved forward to get themselves into range. So this will be 2 more inferior volleys against the 71st Light. Let's roll the first one. That'll be a loss of fire discipline. And then for the second one, an 8 on an inferior volley is 2 casualties against the 71st Light. All right, that's it at the end of turn. So both light sides using their ADCs to grab the initiative. The French were successful. They have 1 hesitant brigade, which is the one in the centre. All other brigades are active and can move. French to charge, which I don't think there'll be any of, or move first. They're going to continue to try and apply pressure and break this British right flank. Okay, turn 13, starting with the French volleys on this left flank. A 9 inferior volley is 2 casualties and a discipline test on the Allies. They've only taken 2, so this will be a discipline test at -1. See if they can do better than last time. A 4, that's a 3. I don't believe it. That's another retreat result. They're very fragile up on the Puebla heights. All right, I'm going to do that retreat. It looks to me like they might just be more than 18 inches in, but we'll see. Then we'll do a volley against the Skirmishes. This will be at minus nothing. A 9, a 10 rather. That goes down to an 8. That is 2 more casualties on those skirmishes, and that might be another loss of an Allied skirmish base. Okay, so tragedy for the British, 2 bad morale rolls, and they've lost both of their formed battalions that were holding this central position. So the French are going to hang on to the Puebla heights. It feels inevitable now. They've only a few British skirmish stands opposing them, and no troops really, and certainly not sufficient troops from the British able to come up here. I really thought the British had done this here with their superiority in skirmishes. I thought they would chew their way through these French battalions with their really effective skirmish fire, which had worked so well against the French skirmish screen, but it failed them at the wrong moment, and they've been unlucky. So the French, all they have to do is push forward and cause another base to go on any one of the British units, and then that brigade will be broken, or indeed just simply push them off the table. All right, now let's move over here. We've got a couple of inferior volleys as the French crest the hill and start targeting the British in the centre. A 5 will be nothing, and then from the other battalion, a 6, which will go down to a 4, would be a loss of fire discipline against the skirmishers, and then a standard volley from this brigade in the centre. A 10, that is more effective. A 10 is 4 casualties and a discipline test on this battalion. The British are going to hang on. Okay, so that's 6 casualties now on the British. So a little bit of discipline test at -1. Okay, so that's an 8, goes down to a 7. They hang on and are fine. All right, this battalion also will do, no, that's nothing. That's a 4, and there are many minuses. Okay, the French skirmishers are fired. That infantry battalion's out of range. Okay, so the French down here will open fire against the Allies. All right, these are all inferior volleys as all these French battalions have moved forward. Firing at the far right-hand end of the line is nothing. That's a loss of fire discipline. This battalion in the centre, this is a -1. That'll be nothing. And this one will be at -2, and it's going through a skirmish screen. In fact, it will go into the skirmishes. So this will be at -2 and an inferior volley. That's a 5. It's 1 casualty against the skirmisher screen, which means they lose another skirmisher stand. But that is it. So the pressure on this right-hand end of the Allied line is really not working, and the British counterfire could be very effective, but the French look to have won it on the left. Okay, so we've just rolled for ADCs. All brigades are active, and we did do a recording, but unfortunately I pressed photo rather than video. So I can't promise to roll the dice again, but one of these dice up here, indeed that one, was the ADC roll for the French brigade. So they've gone active and obeying orders, so they are not broken. So we carry on into turn 14. And in fact it must have been a different one, because the 6 and the 6 and the 5 and the 5 you can see there were my rolls for the initiative. The French and the British draw, but the French had initiative last turn, so French get to charge and move first. Any charges, and then we'll see what we do for movement. Okay, so the main action was in the centre outside the villages. The Portuguese are looking to crush this British-French battalion, which is trying to stick in there. It's going to have to divert some fire against them. They were just out of charge range to the Portuguese this turn, so they've moved up. The British are going to exchange volleys with the French over here. The French are continuing to push on to Puebla heights, and the Allies are just withdrawing to try and avoid being broken. They've effectively conceded the heights now, and we'll see how the volley fire goes on the other flank. All right, let's start with the French firing. So we got inferior volley against the flank of the Scots down here. We roll a 6 for an inferior volley is 1 casualty against the Highlanders. Okay, and then the 2nd battalion on this hill will open fire. This will be a standard volley. That's an 8. That's better. That's 3 more casualties on the Scots. That takes them up to 10. They're nearly at breakpoint. And then this battalion will also open fire at the Scots. Another standard volley. That's another 8. That's 3 more casualties. Wow, the Scots have really taken it this turn. Let's check. We'll see whether that's a large battalion. It may not be, in which case it is broken. Then we've got an inferior volley, which will fire against the Portuguese. A 6 is 1 casualty against the Portuguese in the centre here. And then the other battalion will also fire. This is at -2. Sorry, that should have been a 5 for an inferior volley. Is nothing. Okay, and then a 6 at -2 is also nothing. So they're not on 3 casualties, they are still only on 2 casualties, and that French firing was ineffective. Alright, we've got some French skirmishers, which do cause 1 casualty. We probably won't bother marking it up, we're so late in the game. We're just trying to finish off now. This one is out of range, an inferior volley here at -2. A 765 will do nothing, and then at 9 will also be at -2, and 876, just 1 casualty. Whoa, nearly breaks that battalion. That's up to 14 casualties, and now time for some Allied return fire. Now I'll just check out the strength of the Scots. As you can see, we now have a large hole in the Allied right centre, as the Scots have been withered away by those combined volleys of the French, but now we get the Allied counterfire. See how they can do here. This battalion in the centre, this Royal Scots. Wow, doesn't do anything, loses fire discipline. Then the garrison will fire at the French battalion that's next to it. It does 2 casualties, I think that's enough. Yeah, that's another battalion gone. The combined pressure of all this shooting is really whittling the units down now. Let's take that one off, that'll be another falter test on the French, as we lose that battalion this turn. Okay. Then we've got a couple more volleys over here. Again, inferior volleys as everything was retiring. Let's have a look, see how many casualties. This one is on -3. A 5 will be nothing. This one is on -2 and does nothing, but both of them are large battalions, so both of them get a combat dice, which also do nothing. So no more Allied casualties caused, and the French remain intact on the right flank. So that's the end of turn 14. We'll move on with falter tests and the start of turn 15, see whether we can call it. Okay, start of turn 15, and both brigades again rolled 6s, so they both obey orders, and we've moved to initiative. The Allies won initiative and charged with the Portuguese. So let's do some defensive volleys. They'll both be -1 and -2. First volley is a 3, that's lots of fire discipline, and the second one at -2 is an 11, that's pretty good. So standard goes down to a 9, that's 3 casualties on the Portuguese, and a discipline test. Let's do their discipline test first. They roll a 6, that goes down to a 5, so they go unformed. Now let's do the charge results. My gosh, the French might hold off this fresh charge by the Portuguese. Okay, so thanks to those combined volleys and the fact that the Portuguese have gone unformed on the charge, the French get a +5 to this. That takes 7 to a 12. They've won by more than 6. The Portuguese retreat and take a further 1d3 casualties, which is an extra 2. So they got up to 7 casualties, and that attack is thrown back at the start of turn 15. And tragically, we did a risk to general test. We rolled an 11, which means the Portuguese, or British brigadier leading the Portuguese brigade, was killed. And that brigade, the Portuguese brigade, is now faltering. This is vital to hang on to the village for the Allies. Alright, that's it for charges. We'll now move on with normal movement. Okay, so the Royal Scots now being thoroughly outflanked. And this brigade, for those of you who remember our first battle of the campaign, is the reinforcing brigade I acquired for the French. As a result of that, is proving decisive, starting to roll up the Allied flank as we get on to turn 15. So the Allies are pulling back here in the face of, although very weak, French battalions. 7 casualties on this battalion, 1 on that one, 5 on that one, and 3 on that one. So actually these French battalions aren't in too bad a shape, putting real pressure on this flank of the Allied formation. Over here the French are in much more trouble. This unit now has 10 casualties. This one has, if I can read that right, 8, and that one has 9, but they're This one's pulled back a bit, but the one on the right stayed where it is because it needs to cause one more casualty to cause another Falter test. So let's roll a bit more firing for the French. These battalions are all fired in the close assault, so it's finally that last battalion on the right hand side. No, it does nothing. And the British get to fire back at -2. Wow, they roll a 12. That could be the end of that French battalion, and that was a bad decision to stay in that fight. They've still got some fight in them, so a superior volley is 6 casualties. Wow, yeah, that's the end of that French battalion. That'll be a discipline test on that French brigade on the right, and that was a bit of a tragic result for the French. They only needed that one more casualty, but they couldn't pull it off, and they've been wiped out by the return volley. Okay, that's it, and then we'll move on to turn 16. Okay, so these rolls could be critical. We've got discipline tests to take both for the British and for the French. The French, because of that battalion, destroyed on the far right flank, and they were hoping to push their luck and break the British as well. And the Portuguese for failing their destiny test. All right, let's do the French first. So this brigade in the centre, what will it do? It rolls a 2. That's not a great result. A 2 on line is a retire result. If we do a retire, I think we'll lose one of those battalions, so we'll go for a reroll. We roll a 6. They obey orders. Wow, remarkable. That's not a broken brigade. That's still at 50% strength. So it's hanging in there. All right, now for the Allies. Their Falter test for the Portuguese. They roll a 1. We're definitely going for a reroll. They roll another 1. That's a disaster. That's a savoir keeper. Loses at ADC. Retreating and routing units disperse. All other units take an extra 2 casualties. And retreat. So the Portuguese have to flee the village. Okay, so this is actually a clear victory for the French. So the British victory conditions require them to break 3 French brigades, capture the village, and capture the Puebla heights and push the French off both, and thus outflank the main French position. They've been unable to do that, even without that very swingy last turn of the game when the French recaptured the village due to an unlucky Falter test and then a destiny test, or a destiny test resulting in a Falter test which the Portuguese failed and fled from the village. The Portuguese would have only broken at best 1 French brigade, possibly this one on the right, and actually, as you saw, it did not fail its Falter test, although everyone was extremely lucky in this game, rolling a succession of 6s. So the Portuguese, even if we hadn't had that last very decisive final turn and stopped at turn 15, the Portuguese would have only captured this village, and the heights of Puebla were well beyond their grasp, with the French battalions that were remorselessly advancing forward and pushing the remaining British troops off the ridge. I really thought that one was going to go the other way. The British firepower was inexorably wiped out all the French skirmish screens. We caused 2 destiny tests on this French brigade, but the skirmish fire failed just at the point we needed to start taking those British battalions down. And then 2, again, lucky break tests on the British caused their 2 formed battalions in this sector and on the ridge to fall back. In the centre, the British did well initially, advancing up the centre, capturing the village, and it looked like the Portuguese were going to punch through and break this French brigade that had previously been holding the village, and there was always a chance of breaking that brigade on the right, although that British brigade did suffer very heavy casualties earlier in the game. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the game. There may be a gap of a week or 2. We've just been away on holiday and I've used all my backlog of videos up that I pre-recorded. So me and Jules are going to be tussling for use of this table as she's just started an Open University qualification. So I won't have the dining room table to myself so much as well. So anyway, hope you're enjoying the videos. I'd love to get your comments. Please comment on the videos, comment on the sound, on the game. So this is the 2nd scenario in the Vitoria campaign, and it looks like the French are doing quite well. They're on a bit of a roll. 1-2 games in a row, and we'll see how they do when we resume this campaign with the 3rd scenario as our next outing with camera. Might pop up 1 or 2 short ones in the meantime before I manage to get some longer films in the can. But anyway, appreciate your comments. Keep watching the videos, recommend us to anyone else, and I'll see you all next time. Cheers, everyone.